This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll show you why error-proofing is so important, especially in healthcare.
And we'll also look at copycats and the trouble they cause. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for July 22nd, 2011. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Editor-in-Chief Dirk Ducharme. Well, we talk a lot in Quality Digest about the importance of error proofing, but let's face it, all errors are not created equal, and when it comes to healthcare, accuracy is literally a life and death case, and that is actually the focus of one of our stories this week. This story came from Bill Levinson, and I'll bring it up here. Medical tragedy can be easily prevented by error proofing. And in this story, Bill Levinson talks about Ford's can't rather than don't principle. And he says that it's as applicable in healthcare as it is anywhere else. We're familiar with it in manufacturing. But he leads off with a story, an article written by Gary Brandeland, The Day Joy Died. Now, Gary Brandeland is a physician, actually obstetrician, I believe. So, yeah. And he recounts a story of about 20 years ago, and keep that in mind, we're talking 20 years ago. Maybe things have changed a little, hopefully a lot. But the problem is still prevalent. And what he talks about is a medical tragedy that happened about 20 years ago, where he had one of his patients who went in for a C-section, and the anesthetist put the breathing tube down the esophagus rather than down the trachea. To compound errors, she also did not hook up a pulse oximeter, which is a little device that measures the oxygen saturation in your blood. If she had done that, she would have noticed that there was no oxygen coming back. And she didn't do that, so the combination of those, number one, the intubation going down the wrong tube and not monitoring the oxygen sats, led to this woman not getting any oxygen, and as a result she died, and her unborn baby was injured, seriously injured. Yeah. So Levinson uses this as a leaping off point to discuss the concept of error proofing in medicine, and the idea of there are things, sure, we all know about things you don't do. You don't put the breathing tube down down the esophagus rather than the trachea. You don't operate on the wrong knee. There are things you don't do, but how about preventing? How about keeping them from happening? How about having medical devices or procedures in place such that it's not a matter of don't do this, it's a matter of I can't do this, or if I accidentally do it, alarms and bells and everything are going to go off and let me know.
It's an engineering thing. It's designing into the process safe points that prevent you from doing something wrong.
Exactly, and it's two things. It's an engineering thing. But it is also a process thing. And in fact, he actually references just in passing the Occupational Safety and Health Standard 18001, which is like the other kind of ISO 9000 related standards, is a management standard, right? And it's a means of putting procedures in place to keep things from happening, things you don't want to happen, to keep them from happening. Now he points to Ford and talks what an innovator Ford was, because Ford created all sorts of procedures, the can't rather than don't, within the manufacturing facility. Anybody who's ever worked around large presses can trace this back to Ford. Anybody who's worked in large manufacturing, large presses, large pieces of equipment with pinch points, you'll know that it takes two hands to operate them. In other words, you can't have an on button with one hand so that you can have the other hand inside the machine. It takes two hands to operate the machine. That way you know you're clear of the machine.
Very simple. Yeah. Very simple fix.
Supposedly, according to Levinson, Ford came up with that concept. And if you have a two-man, he extends that, if you have a two-man machine, then it requires four hands. Interlocks.
So you really have to want to hurt yourself.
And he says, okay, suppose we carry this over into the medical profession. He said there were several problems that happened in this particular case. One is the breathing tube went down the esophagus. Okay, well that's an operator error that can happen. The next thing that didn't happen is the pulse oximeter wasn't put on the patient. Now, what should have happened is that pulse oximeter should have been screaming an alarm saying, hey, my oxygen's at zero, my oxygen's at zero. And by the way, I don't know if maybe back then they didn't have it, but nowadays you do. If you've ever been in the hospital and hooked up to an EKG or a pulse ox is the little thing that goes on your finger, and you accidentally pulled it off or disconnected it, you'll hear alarms go off, and within a few minutes a nurse will come in to check on you and connect you all back up and say, please don't pull the EKG off. And that's the kind of things he's talking about, is there should be some sort of warning in anything medically related that when you've done something wrong, you immediately know about it, or there's a way to prevent you from actually doing that.
Even better, sure, even better, prevent it from that.
Yeah, and he talks about, these ideas have been around for a long time, and he kind of asked the question, why isn't this being done even more? It's like it's not a new concept to healthcare. He said a long time ago, medicines that were poisonous would come in either a bright blue bottle, or they would come in a bottle that had, you've probably seen the bottles that have like little pointy things coming off of them. I mean, they look like a porcupine, right? And so when you pick up the bottle, you're obviously picking up something that's got a very different texture. And that was kind of the warning for the physician or the nurse that, oh, hey, well, what am I got in my hand here? Is this really what I want? And these kind of things have been around for a long time. And yet we still hear about tragedies like this, where there was the heparin thing a few years ago.
Happened a few times, many times, unfortunately.
And all the time, I swear, 2 or 3 months don't go by, you hear about somebody who had the wrong arm operated, the wrong knee operated, the wrong hip replaced.
Sure. And what are you going to do? I mean, that's not like you can't do make good with your customer.
Yeah, can you put my old hip back and do it on the other one? Yeah.
These are major issues.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that it's not funny, but I mean, my wife's a nurse, so I know the stress that kind of environment is on. There's a lot going on. There's people running back and forth. I mean, and she was a floor nurse. I mean, being an emergency room nurse or being a surgical nurse, you got all sorts of stuff going on. So you can't rely on human fallibility. There's got to be processes and mechanics in place that really scream at you when you do something wrong.
Prevent the error from happening, or design it so that it can't be done at all. I mean, we had an article, Mark Graber wrote an article for us not long ago on In-N-Out Burger, where he talked about, and obviously this is a much less of an issue, but where they didn't want you to throw your trays away, so they designed the hole so the tray couldn't get into it.
Literally couldn't.
I mean, again, simple fixes, and the simple fixes are the ones that are best because they last and they take the error almost totally away. The possibility for an error almost totally away from the operator.
Well, and I know when my father-in-law went in for knee surgery a long time, the day before the surgery, or maybe it was the morning of, they came in, verified with him what knee is it going to be operated on, and they actually put a big X on that knee, so that when he went in for surgery later on, hopefully they knew to look for the knee with the X.
That's right.
And didn't interpret it as that X. Oh no, don't do that one. Do the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, not that one.
No, not that one. Yeah.
That's a good
what
one.
Does the X mean again? Yeah.
So,
operate here, not here. Yeah. Okay.
So these are key issues.
Yeah, and I think they're important for healthcare, and they're important to us as a magazine to cover this type of issue, because quality in healthcare really is, I believe, at the root of a lot of our healthcare expense issues. I mean,
poor quality.
When there's mistakes, it costs a lot of money. I mean, it costs the hospital a lot of money, it costs the doctors a lot of money, it costs the insurance companies a lot of money. They're not footing that bill.
No.
They pass it on to us.
Sure, it's a cost of poor quality issue more than anything else, as much as anything else. And obviously with the economic incentive as well as the humanistic incentive to prevent these errors, you think that as we hopefully as we go along here, these things will become less and less prevalent.
So Ford, what, 80 years after Ford, and he's still got awesome ideas.
That's right, and he had ideas in the healthcare industry.
And he had health, exactly. If you want to read some interesting, you should look up on our website. Look up just in the search box in the upper right. Just type in William Levinson and read through a lot of his articles. He does a lot with Ford and talks a lot about the little-known aspects of some of Ford's innovation that is really fascinating.
It's interesting. Great. Well, thanks, Dirk. Good story. Thanks, Dirk. Thanks, Bill. Well, I had a story I wanted to cover this week from Paul Naismith. And the title of this article was, "If Deming could see what you're doing, ... And very interesting. He talks about benchmarking or copying is what is the term that Paul uses. And he gets into this with a story where he talks about a friend of his who was working for what I took to be a manufacturing environment. I think it's a manufacturing plant. And this fellow was trying to untangle kind of a fouled up process where what happened was a customer received a product with an assembly that was messed up, and that was obviously a very unhappy customer. I'm not sure if they lost that customer or if they kept them, but the net result obviously was an unhappy customer. Now, Paul and his buddy sat and talked about this and to try to uncover why this happened. Well, why this happened was that the shipment went out on a Friday afternoon. Okay, shipments go out all the time. Shipment went out on a Friday afternoon. However, as Paul got into this with his friend, he discovered that, well, there was no technician, no engineer on staff at the time in the building to check it before it went out. Why was there no engineer on there at the time? Because they had made a deal with the company where they would have every other Friday a half day. Right. Why did they make this thing where they wouldn't have any quality technicians available on every other half Friday? Because a competitive company was offering the every other Friday completely off, and they were starting to drain away.
They were losing some of their employees.
They said, "Well, we got to match this. So what we're going to do is we can't give you a Friday off every other week, but we'll give you a half day every other Friday." Yeah. So all the technicians were off on Friday afternoons. So there was nobody there to check the package. Good
idea.
Does the old saw about for want of a nail the kingdom was lost remind anybody of anything?
Right.
This is crazy. I mean, you look at that, you say, well, that's nuts.
Why the intentions were good.
The intentions were good, and and the reason why they did this were good too. They felt like they needed to give some benefits to their employees in order to maintain their competitiveness within that marketplace. But obviously, the results didn't work. So you look at this, and I thought about this, and I said, well, shoot, and Paul said it too, copying doesn't really work. You can't ever Xerox a culture and take it from one to another. You know, this idea of benchmarking now is all well and good, and benchmarking in and of itself, I think, is great. Right. I think we've seen a lot of great companies get a lot out of benchmarking. I happened to actually write a story a couple of years ago in Quality Digest where I talked about a couple of partner companies, Cummins and PACCAR, Cummins an engine manufacturer, diesel engine manufacturer, and PACCAR, Peterbilt, and a few other brands who design trucks, design 18-wheelers. And one of the companies started with, I think it was PACCAR, started with Six Sigma and got a lot of use out of it, brought it to Cummins through the supply chain, and Cummins embraced it. So the two companies both use Six Sigma. That's a case of benchmarking that works, where there was a methodology that could go across the supply chain, and the culture worked.
I think you just hit on something really important. Is what they copied was a methodology, an idea.
Right.
Whereas in the example Smith gave, it wasn't a methodology. It's let's take this particular action and transplant it. Well, that doesn't necessarily work.
Forget about whether or not it fits in your culture. Forget about whether or not it makes sense for what you're doing. Gosh, you don't have anybody available on a Friday afternoon to check shipments? I mean, for crying out loud, that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, then there's other ways they could have worked around it. They could have potentially, I don't know, say, done it on shifts. One Friday, half of the team is off. The other Friday, the other half of the team is off. Or I don't know. I'm doing the same thing that they were doing.
Because we don't know.
I'm looking at it without knowing and saying maybe this was the solution. I don't know, but they should have looked at their culture and looked at their processes and redesigned them to make them work better.
Now he kind of led off with if Edward Deming could see what you're doing, he'd punch you in the face.
Right.
And the reason he did that is because later on he's talking about why Deming. In fact, Deming kind of commented on this.
He did actually.
In a sense.
Why don't you call it up? Because Deming had an excellent quote about this that Paul reprinted in his article. If Deming could see what you're doing, American management thinks they can just copy from Japan, but they don't know what to copy.
Right.
Perfect example. Where American management, especially
they see something over there, they think, oh, this is good.
They see that, they say TQM, quality circles, whatever it may be, and they're going to bring it here, and they're going to try to just replicate it.
And just plug it in.
Yeah. Now, that may or may not work. Probably not.
Cultural differences?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, American workers need to do things in their own way, and the companies that have best adapted some Japanese practices to here are the ones that brought it into their own culture.
Right.
So it was. I think he makes a fair point about Deming looking at this and scratching his head and saying, "Why are you just copying?"
Why? As a matter of fact, I remember watching. I remember watching a video clip of this, and Deming in his kind of way, you know, I remember the way he kind of said that, which is like, you know, what the heck were they thinking?
What are they thinking? Yeah, I mean, well, but you understand why. You understand why these things happen because of, especially in the 70s and 80s, in the automotive industry, and that was kind of a lot of the environment that Deming was working within. The competitiveness, American manufacturing in the automotive space in that day and age really was having a problem, and it was like, fix it. Fine. CEOs were going out to
do anything.
Figure it out.
Which I think is what people are doing. Like the company he mentions is they have a problem. We need a quick fix. Hey, look what they're doing over there. Well, let's just do the same thing, and they don't look at the context.
Right, and that's a problem. Now I want to get to one other point with this story because the lead of this, if Deming could see what you're doing, ... and the punchline on that was he'd punch you in the face.
He'd punch you in the face.
That's what Paul had said. Now, was that a little bombastic? Was that a little over the top? Yeah, maybe. I mean, it was definitely compelling. It definitely, I think, got some people to read the article. And Paul even kind of apologized later in the piece for that and said, well, you know, from everything I've learned about Deming, he was really...
But for one of our readers, that was a little...
It was a little bit over the top.
It was over the top, and also the apology just didn't wash. And he sent us a letter, and we want to share all of our letters, the good and the bad.
Right.
This letter came from Mark.
Yep.
The thing that might really make Deming turn in his grave was your writer saying that he would... Deming would punch you in the face.
Yeah.
That was pretty disrespectful of Dr. Deming's memory, I think, and it seemed designed solely to draw in the reader, sort of like a cheap, misleading headline. Thumbs down for the approach that piece took.
Fair comment. Fair comment by Mark. Thank you for that, Mark. And we encourage anyone out there to write us with comments like that to our articles.
If we're off the mark, either if we're off the mark in terms of content, or if you just think that either us or one of our authors goes over the top, let us know.
We listen to that stuff.
We do listen. Yep.
Great. Okay.
We had a couple other letters.
Yep.
This one from Bill. Lately, we have been working with. Oh, this is referring to the Akalesh Gulata last week's article.
Customer requirements.
Customer requirements.
Got customer requirements.
Lately, we've been working with HOQs, and we now require sales folks to participate in HOQ building. We, the technical folks, now get to hear their point of view rather than hear it through a manager. We get to speak with sales staff and see what they really want for the customer and not some watered-down, edited version of what a manager wants to deliver.
Yep, exactly right in line with what Akalesh was talking about in his article.
Yep. Let's see. This letter from Tom. This was an enjoyable 20 minutes, and it got me to read the 2 articles you highlighted. I'll be tuning in each Friday and look forward to the Six Sigma show on the 25th. As the sole quality engineer here, it's good to hear others talking about quality once in a while. Takes away some of that man in the wilderness feeling.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
My wife sometimes, we'll go out to dinner with somebody and they'll ask what I do. And I say, I work for a media company, business to business. What do you guys, write about? Oh, quality control. Oh, yeah, really? What's that about? And I'll start trying to talk about what quality is about, and just like the eyes glaze over, they start to drool. Gotta slap them to wake them up. So yeah, man in the wilderness.
Tom, we know what you're saying.
We know what you're saying.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. Thanks for all of our letter writers this week. So keep those letters coming.
Yeah.
All right. So Tech Corner.
Tech Corner. Okay. I'll try to make this quick. We're running a little late. Don't want to keep you guys. Today on Tech Corner, we have got a product from Amada. This is a force gauge. Some of you may or may not know what a force gauge is. It is exactly what it says it is. It is a device, I'll show it on the other little camera up here, where when you push in on the plunger, it measures positive force in foot-pounds or pound-foots or kilogram-foots or newtons. If you pull on it, it does the same thing, except just simply measures in the opposite direction. So regardless of whether you're pulling or pushing, it's measuring a force. Now this can be used in a lot of ways. It can be used as a simple go, no-go gauge for measuring force. It can also be used a lot of times for destructive testing and for measuring other things where the force varies over time, or where force ramps up to a certain point and then changes, and you want to map that. And I've got a couple of examples of how that works, and I'll demonstrate some of the feature of this as we do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a set of dictionaries here. These are the dictionaries we use here at Quality Digest. These are the 1956 edition of Webster's. Only the latest for Quality Digest editors.
They're vintage.
Yeah, they're vintage. Yeah, they got words in there that, you know, like vamp and, you know, words you just don't use anymore. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the software here. This software's got a lot of different features. One of them that is the most useful, and that we'll demonstrate here, is the ability to record a reading. So I'm going to set this recording, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pushing on this book, and we're going to look for where the frictional force between the books and the desks breaks, and then how much frictional force it keeps to keep pushing the book along. So we'll start at recording, and I'll start pushing against the book, and then we push, and 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 then it starts moving. Okay, so let's look at what this looked like. So what did we see? We're pushing against the book, and our force is ramping up, ramping up, ramping up. All of a sudden, it releases the frictional force on the books, and now it drops down. And now this force, this line right here on the right, this is how much force it takes simply to keep the book sliding against the desk, which is the frictional force between the dynamic force, frictional force between the books and the desk, whereas this is the static frictional force that you have to overcome. And this is actually, we talk about this in physics in high school, and you've probably done some experiments. It's actually kind of neat to map it out.
Yeah.
Let me do another one, which is probably a little bit more what you might see in a manufacturing environment. And we're going to look at a destructive test. Now, this Amada force gauge comes with a number of different tips. I'm going to switch tips here. I'm going to switch tips to the tip that was...
It rolled off over there.
That rolled off...
No, I got it.
Oh, okay. Yes.
There you are.
Yes, there we go. Fortunately, that was there. Okay, this is just kind of a little pointy tip, and I'm going to use it. What we're going to do is we're going to test how much force does it take before this piece of tape. I'm just going to stretch a piece of masking tape, painter's tape, across the cup here. We're going to start recording, and I'm going to zero out the gauge here, and we're going to press and press, and the tape breaks. So we'll stop recording. Let's go back and look at that. So we see we ramped up, and we see at about roughly, I happen to have it on newtons right now, at a force of 12.7 newtons, the tape breaks. So let's see how repeatable that is. Now, this isn't a very scientific setup we're doing here, but I would guess that it would be roughly in the same position.
12.7 newtons.
12.7 newtons. Let's do it again. So we'll zero this out. We'll start recording. And again, think of this as some destructive test you might do within your product. And we're going to press, and then it breaks. And we stop recording, go back, and hey, look at that, roughly the same, 13 newtons. Okay, isn't that interesting? So did it roughly the same twice in a row. Let's double up the tape. This is two pieces of tape, one on top of the other. I'm just kind of curious what that's actually going to look like. Let's zero this out, start recording, and we'll go and press and press and press. There we go. Tape breaks. So what did we get? Did we get roughly twice, or?
Yeah, looks like it.
If I can get that out of the way. Yeah, we got up to, well, 26 newtons, so roughly twice what we had before.
Yep.
Who knows if that's really linear? You'd have to do 3 pieces and 4 pieces, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, one place where something like this might be used is, let's say you're a toy manufacturer and you make stuffed animals, and you want to measure, let's say, how much force it takes for an eye.
So it has like a hook.
Yeah. There comes a number of attachments. One of them might be one of the attachments is a hook, or you could probably machine your own. It doesn't really matter. You can zero this. You can always zero this out for whatever you're doing. So you hook a hook around that eye and start pulling and see what force it takes to break it loose. And maybe you have some standard. You require, has to be at least so much force in order to pass a test, right?
Right.
Now, I mentioned this works as a no-go, no-go gauge. I'll just show you this really quick. You can program into the software the upper limits and lower limits, and I'll just go up to this camera up here, Chris, just to show you, just real quick. You'll notice that there is a light on the left of the screen, which is, or your right, I guess, which is showing that we're below limit. Okay, now as I start to press, now you see the center light comes on, which means we're in between the low limit and the high limit, so we're in the good range. If I keep pressing, now the high limit light comes on your left. So now, what we've just seen is we've got a high limit, a low limit. Whoop. Oh, I had the peak on. Another function of this is it has it stopped at the peak. this also has a peak hold where it will hold the highest reading that you measure. So it's a very interesting little piece of equipment. The software is easy to use. They sent me a little video. I learned how to use this thing in like 5 minutes. The instruction manual is really small. I mean, seriously, this is really a shop floor tool that anybody could easily get up and using very quick. The data is exportable, I believe, as a CSV. So if you wanted to keep exporting data, do further analysis on it, you could do it. So that's an Amada digital force gauge.
Great. That's terrific. Well, thanks, Dirk. Thanks to the good folks at Amada for providing that to us. And we'll look forward to additional Tech Corners and additional shows coming up. Great. Well, thank you, Dirk. And before we close, I want to remind everyone out there that we have an event coming up in 3 days. We have Tom Pyzdek and Mikel Harry, who are going to be discussing in a Six Sigma roundtable, Quality Digest Live roundtable with us, the future of Six Sigma. And you can fire over any questions that you like to Tom and Mikel at qdl@qualitydigest.com. Let them know what you think. Let them know what you want to know. We'll be talking about, gosh, as I said, the future of Six Sigma in government, military environments, different sectors, a lot of great content. So make sure you're out there. Monday, that's 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday the 25th, right here on Quality Digest.
That's right, and we also have our Technology Live program coming up on Thursday. That is a 1-hour live program, technically oriented. This Thursday is going to be, we're going to be taking a look at a white light scanner from 3D3 Solutions, scanning some products with that, and taking the data from that 3D scan and bringing it into Geomagic Validate, where the data will be Qualify, where the data will be analyzed, and you can draw conclusions from the data, and that's exactly what we're going to be showing.
So check that out as well. That's Thursday, the 28th, and that's at again 11 a.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m.
Eastern. That's right.
Easy for me to say.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for joining us for Quality Digest Live on this Friday and every Friday. And next Friday, actually, we won't be live. It'll be pre-recorded because we will be at the CMSC show in Phoenix. But there will be a show coming on, same time, same channel.
Same bat time, same bat time.
That's right. Okay. Thanks for joining us today.
Have a great weekend. Bye.